What if I told you that a single ultrasound image could destroy a marriage worth $50 million, but also reveal the most beautiful truth about human nature? What if the very moment a wealthy man decided to abandon his wife became the moment that proved he never deserved her in the first place? Welcome back to Mr. Nuel Stories, where we dive deep into the most shocking real-life dramas that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because today's story will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail of what happens next. This is the story of Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant cardiologist, and her husband Marcus Wellington, a tech mogul whose net worth could buy a small country. Their love story began like a fairy tale, but what happened in that ultrasound room will make you believe in miracles and lose faith in humanity all at the same time. The Golden Couple. Picture this: Manhattan's Upper East Side, where money flows like champagne at a billionaire's wedding. In a penthouse overlooking Central Park lived what everyone called the Golden Couple, Dr. Sarah Chen and Marcus Wellington. Sarah, at 32, was already head of cardiology at Mount Sinai Hospital, her delicate hands saving lives daily while her brilliant mind revolutionized heart surgery techniques. Marcus, 35, had built his tech empire from a college dorm room, creating the social media platform that connected half the world. They met at a charity gala. How perfectly cliché, right? Sarah was there representing the hospital's children's heart program. Marcus was the evening's biggest donor. When their eyes met across that crowded ballroom, witnesses later said it was like watching lightning strike twice in the same spot. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, married in a ceremony that made the cover of Vanity Fair. For 3 years, they were Manhattan royalty. Sarah continued saving lives while Marcus conquered Silicon Valley. Their penthouse became the epicenter of New York's elite social scene. But behind the designer gowns and charity galas, Sarah carried a secret pain that was slowly eating away at her perfect facade. The hidden struggle. You see, Sarah and Marcus had been trying to have a baby for over 2 years. Month after month, pregnancy test after pregnancy test came back negative. For a woman who could repair the most complex heart defects, who could bring people back from the brink of death, the inability to create life felt like the cruelest irony. Marcus, initially supportive, began to change. The man who once called her his miracle worker started making subtle comments. "Maybe you're too stressed from work," he'd say. "Perhaps you should take a break from the hospital." What started as concern slowly morphed into something darker: blame. The fertility treatments began. Hormones that made Sarah's body feel foreign to her. Procedures that turned the most intimate aspects of their marriage into clinical appointments. Marcus grew distant, spending more time at his office, taking longer business trips. The charity events continued, but now Sarah attended many alone, fielding whispered questions about when they'd start a family with a smile that never reached her eyes. The breaking point. Then came the night that changed everything. Sarah had just finished a 16-hour surgery, saving the life of a 7-year-old girl with a congenital heart defect. Exhausted but exhilarated by the successful operation, she came home to find Marcus in his study, surrounded by legal documents. "We need to talk," he said, not even looking up from his papers. Sarah's heart, the same heart that remained steady during the most critical surgeries, began to race. She knew that tone. She'd heard it in hospital corridors when doctors delivered devastating news to families. "I've been thinking about our situation," Marcus continued, finally meeting her eyes. "This isn't working, Sarah. The treatments, the stress, the constant disappointment. I think we need to consider that maybe we're not meant to be parents." "What are you saying?" Sarah whispered, though she already knew. "I'm saying maybe it's time we stop trying. Maybe it's time we accepted that our life is just going to be different." But Sarah heard what he wasn't saying. She saw it in his eyes, in the way he'd been pulling away. Marcus wasn't just giving up on having children, he was giving up on her. That night, as Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling while Marcus slept peacefully beside her, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She was going to try one more time, but this time, she wouldn't tell him. This time, she would face whatever came next alone. Little did she know that in just 3 weeks, she'd be sitting in Dr. Rodriguez's office, staring at an ultrasound screen that would reveal something so extraordinary, so impossible, that it would shatter everything she thought she knew about her own body, and her husband's true character. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in the waiting room of Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the city's most renowned fertility specialist. Her hands trembled slightly as she filled out the familiar forms, but this time felt different. This time, she wasn't here with Marcus. This time, she was here for herself. Dr. Rodriguez had been Sarah's medical school classmate, one of the few people who understood the unique pressure of being a woman in medicine. When Sarah called asking for a private consultation, Elena didn't ask questions, she simply made room in her schedule. "Sarah," Dr. Rodriguez said as she entered the examination room, "I have to ask, does Marcus know you're here?" Sarah shook her head. "I need to know if there's anything else we can try. Anything at all. I can't give up, Elena. Not yet." What Sarah didn't tell her friend was that she'd already found the divorce papers. Hidden in Marcus's desk drawer, already filled out, waiting only for his signature. The man she'd loved for 4 years, the man she'd built a life with, was planning to leave her. But she needed to know, for her own peace of mind, if motherhood was truly impossible. The examination began like dozens of others Sarah had endured. Blood work, physical exam, the familiar cold gel on her abdomen as the ultrasound wand moved across her skin. Dr. Rodriguez chatted casually as she worked, discussing new techniques, mutual colleagues, anything to keep Sarah's mind off the procedure. But then Dr. Rodriguez went silent. Sarah, who had learned to read medical professionals' expressions like a second language, immediately noticed the change. "Elena? What is it?" Dr. Rodriguez was staring at the ultrasound screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. She adjusted the machine, moved the wand to a different position, then stared at the screen again. "Sarah," she said slowly, "when was your last period?" "About 6 weeks ago, but that's normal for me with all the hormone treatments." "Elena, you're scaring me. What do you see?" Dr. Rodriguez turned the screen toward Sarah, and what she saw made her heart stop. There, clear as day on the black and white monitor, was a tiny form. A head, barely visible limbs, and most incredibly of all, a strong, steady heartbeat flickering like a beacon of hope. "Sarah," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, tears forming in her eyes, "you're pregnant. About 8 weeks along." Sarah stared at the screen in disbelief. After 2 years of negative tests, failed treatments, and crushing disappointment, there it was, her miracle. But as the initial shock wore off, a more complex emotion took its place. "Elena," Sarah said, her voice barely audible, "there's something else. Something I need to tell you." She explained about the distance in her marriage, about Marcus's growing resentment, about the divorce papers she'd found. As she spoke, Dr. Rodriguez's expression grew increasingly concerned. "Sarah, you have to tell him. This changes everything." But Sarah shook her head. "Does it? What if he only stays because of the baby? What if he resents us both? I need to think about this." What Sarah didn't share was the conversation she'd overheard just 2 nights earlier. Marcus on the phone with his lawyer, discussing asset protection and prenuptial agreements. She'd heard him say the words that shattered her heart, "She's obsessed with having a baby. It's consuming our entire marriage. I can't live like this anymore." Pause the video right here and tell me in the comments, what would you do in Sarah's situation? Would you tell your husband immediately, or would you wait to see his true character? And if you're loving this story as much as I am, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this incredible tale. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless." For the next week, Sarah carried her secret like a precious, fragile treasure. She went through the motions of her daily life, performing surgeries, attending meetings, having dinner with Marcus, all while knowing that everything had changed. She found herself studying Marcus with new eyes. The way he barely looked up from his phone during dinner. How he'd started sleeping on his side of the bed, careful not to touch her even accidentally. The way he'd begun talking about space and finding himself. Meanwhile, Sarah's body was already beginning to change. The morning nausea she'd attributed to stress from work took on new meaning. The exhaustion she'd blamed on long hospital hours suddenly made perfect sense. And for the first time in months, when she looked in the mirror, she saw hope in her own eyes. But the hardest part was the joy. The pure, overwhelming joy that she had to hide from the one person she'd always shared everything with. She wanted to shout it from the rooftops, to call her mother, to celebrate this miracle that she'd prayed for every night for 2 years. Instead, she scheduled another appointment with Dr. Rodriguez for the following week, and began to plan for a conversation that would either save her marriage or end it forever. But the opportunity came sooner than expected. Marcus came home early from work on a Thursday evening, something he hadn't done in months. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing dinner and fighting a wave of morning sickness that had decided to make an evening appearance. "Sarah, we need to talk," Marcus said, and she knew from his tone that the moment she'd been dreading had arrived. They sat in their living room, the same room where they'd planned their wedding, where they'd dreamed about their future children, where they'd held each other through the disappointments of failed fertility treatments. "I think we both know this isn't working," Marcus began, his voice carefully controlled. "We've grown apart. We want different things. I think it's time we were honest about that." Sarah felt the baby, their baby, like a secret heartbeat inside her chest. "What are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying I think we should separate. Take some time apart. Figure out what we really want from life." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Sarah looked at the man she'd loved for 4 years, the man whose child she was carrying, and realized she was looking at a stranger. "Is there someone else?" she asked quietly. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's not about someone else. It's about us. About how we've become people we don't recognize." But Sarah saw the truth in his eyes. There was someone else. While she'd been pouring her heart into trying to create life with him, he'd been creating a life without her. That night, Sarah made a decision that would test everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. She was going to tell Marcus about the baby, but not in the way he expected. She was going to give him a choice that would reveal his true character once and for all. What she planned would either prove that the man she married still existed somewhere inside the stranger sitting across from her, or it would free her to build the life she and her child deserved. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 3 years. She spent the day planning what she would say, how she would say it, and most importantly, how she would handle whatever Marcus's reaction might be. She decided to tell him that evening, after dinner, in the same living room where he'd asked for a separation. But she wouldn't just tell him about the pregnancy, she would give him a choice that would reveal everything about the man he'd become. Sarah prepared Marcus's favorite meal, set the table with their wedding china, and waited for him to come home. When he walked through the door at 7:30, he looked surprised by the effort she'd made. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the candle at dinner. "I wanted to talk to you about what you said yesterday," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. They ate in relative silence, making small talk about work and current events, both avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, as Sarah cleared the dishes, she took a deep breath and began. "Marcus, before we make any final decisions about our marriage, there's something you need to know." Sarah sat back down across from her husband and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were the ultrasound photos from her appointment with Dr. Rodriguez, along with the blood test results confirming her pregnancy. I'm pregnant, she said simply, sliding the envelope across the table. The color drained from Marcus's face as he opened the envelope and stared at the ultrasound images. For a long moment, he said nothing, just looked at the tiny form on the black and white photos. How long have you known? He asked finally. A week. And you didn't tell me? Sarah met his eyes steadily. I wanted to see what kind of man you really are. I wanted to know if you would choose to leave me even when you thought I couldn't give you what you wanted most. Marcus set the photos down carefully, his hands shaking slightly. Sarah, this changes everything. Does it? Sarah asked. Or does it just complicate your exit strategy? The question hung between them like a challenge. Sarah watched as emotions played across Marcus's face, surprise, confusion, and something that might have been joy, quickly followed by what looked suspiciously like calculation. I have a proposition for you, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. I'm going to give you a choice, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Marcus leaned forward, his business instincts kicking in. What kind of choice? You can stay. We can try to work on our marriage, raise this child together, and see if we can find our way back to each other. Or. Sarah paused, gathering her courage for what came next. You can leave. Right now. Tonight. I'll never ask you for anything, no alimony, no child support, nothing. You can have your freedom, and I'll raise our child alone. Marcus stared at her in shock. Sarah, you can't be serious. You're talking about giving up millions of dollars. I'm talking about giving you the chance to show me who you really are, Sarah replied. If you stay, I need to know it's because you want to be here, not because you feel trapped or obligated. And if you leave, I need to know that too. What happened next would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life, but not in the way she expected. Marcus stood up from the table and began pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. This is insane, Sarah. You can't just give me an ultimatum like this. It's not an ultimatum, Sarah said quietly. It's a gift. I'm giving you permission to be honest about what you really want. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her, and in that moment, Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. It wasn't love, or even regret. It was relief. You're right, he said finally. I have been unhappy. We both have. Maybe this is for the best. Sarah felt something inside her chest crack, but she kept her voice steady. So what's your choice? Marcus looked at the ultrasound photos one more time, then back at his wife. I think you and the baby deserve better than someone who isn't sure. I think you deserve someone who chooses you every day, not someone who feels trapped. So you're leaving, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. I'm leaving, Marcus confirmed. But Sarah, I want you to know that this isn't about the baby. This is about us. About how we've grown apart. But Sarah knew better. She saw the relief in his eyes, the way his shoulders relaxed as he made his decision. Marcus wasn't leaving because they'd grown apart, he was leaving because he'd never really grown up. I need you to pause right here and really think about what's happening. A man just chose his own comfort over his wife and unborn child. But here's what's incredible about this story: what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. If this story is hitting you as hard as it's hitting me, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think of Marcus's decision. And stick around, because Sarah's response is going to absolutely blow your mind. What Marcus expected was tears, pleading, maybe even anger. What he got instead was something that would haunt him for years to come. Sarah stood up calmly, walked to the kitchen, and returned with a bottle of champagne, the same brand they'd shared on their wedding night. What are you doing? Marcus asked, confused. Sarah popped the cork and poured herself a small glass. Then raised it in a toast. I'm celebrating, she said. Celebrating what? The fact that my child will never have to wonder if their father truly wanted them, Sarah replied, her voice clear and strong. You just gave me the greatest gift you could possibly give, the knowledge that I'm better off without you. Marcus stared at her in shock. This wasn't the broken, desperate woman he'd expected to leave behind. This was someone he'd never seen before, someone strong, confident, and completely unafraid. Sarah, No, she interrupted. You've made your choice. Now let me make mine. I choose to be grateful. Grateful that you showed me who you really are before our child was old enough to be disappointed by you. Grateful that I get to raise this miracle without having to worry about whether their father resents their existence. As Marcus packed his bags that night, Sarah made a phone call that would change everything. She called her lawyer, not to discuss divorce proceedings, but to discuss something far more important. I want to set up a trust fund, she told him. For my child's education and future. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, they'll never need anything from their father. What Marcus didn't know, what Sarah had never told him, was that she had her own money. Lots of it. Her groundbreaking research in pediatric cardiology had led to several medical patents that generated millions in royalties. She'd kept it separate from their joint accounts, a safety net she'd never thought she'd need. But more than that, Sarah had something Marcus would never understand, the respect and admiration of her colleagues, the gratitude of the hundreds of families whose children she'd saved, and now, the fierce love of a mother who would move mountains for her child. 6 months later. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the nursery she'd designed herself, her hands resting on her growing belly. At 6 months pregnant, she was radiant in a way that had nothing to do with the so-called pregnancy glow, and everything to do with the peace she'd found in her new life. The divorce had been finalized quickly and quietly. Marcus had kept his word about not asking for anything, though Sarah suspected it had more to do with his new girlfriend, a 25-year-old influencer he'd started dating just weeks after leaving, than any sense of honor. But Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Without the stress of trying to save a failing marriage, her work at the hospital had reached new heights. She'd been offered the position of chief of pediatric cardiology, making her the youngest department head in the hospital's history. More importantly, she'd discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The woman who had once defined herself through her relationship with Marcus had found her own identity as a mother-to-be, a healer, and a force to be reckoned with. What surprised Sarah most was how much support she received once people learned about her situation. Her colleagues at the hospital rallied around her, offering everything from babysitting services to home-cooked meals. Her parents, initially shocked by the divorce, became her fiercest champions once they understood what had happened, but the most unexpected support came from Marcus's own family. His mother, Catherine Wellington, had been horrified when she learned about her son's decision. She'd called Sarah personally to apologize and to ask if she could remain part of the baby's life. "That child is my grandchild," Catherine had said, tears in her voice. "And you, my dear, are twice the person my son will ever be." Even Marcus's business partners had reached out, several of them offering Sarah positions on their boards or investment opportunities. It seemed that Marcus's reputation in the business community had suffered far more from his personal choices than Sarah's had. One evening in her 7th month, Sarah was reviewing patient files when her doorman called to announce a visitor. She wasn't expecting anyone, but when she heard the name, her blood ran cold. Marcus was downstairs, asking to see her. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity got the better of her. What could he possibly want after all this time? When she opened the door, she barely recognized the man standing in her hallway. Marcus looked haggard, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated posture she'd never seen before. "Hello, Sarah," he said quietly. "Marcus. What are you doing here? I wanted to see how you were doing." To see. His eyes dropped to her obviously pregnant belly, to see how the baby is. Sarah stepped aside to let him in, more out of shock than invitation. The baby is fine. I'm fine. We're both doing very well without you. Marcus winced at the directness of her words. Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About the choices I made. And I think I made a mistake. Sarah looked at the man she'd once loved more than life itself and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no longing. Just a mild curiosity about what had brought him to her door. What kind of mistake? She asked. Marcus sat down heavily on her couch, the same couch where they'd once planned their future together. I thought I wanted freedom. I thought I wanted a life without complications, without the pressure of trying to be someone I wasn't sure I could be. And now? Now I realize that what I had with you was real. What I have now. He shook his head. It's empty, Sarah. It's all surface, no substance. Sarah sat down across from him, her hands instinctively moving to her belly. So what are you saying, Marcus? I'm saying I want to come back. I want to be part of this, part of our family. I want to be the father this baby deserves. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw not the confident, successful man she'd married, but someone desperate and lost. No, she said simply. Marcus looked up in shock. No? No, Marcus. You don't get to come back. You don't get to decide that now, when it's convenient for you, you want to be a father. You made your choice when you walked out that door. But Sarah, I love you. I love our baby. Sarah shook her head sadly. You love the idea of us. You love the safety net we represent now that your new life isn't working out. But you don't love us enough to have stayed when things were hard. What Sarah told Marcus next would stay with him for the rest of his life. Do you want to know what I've learned in the past 7 months? She asked. I've learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. Every day, you choose to love someone or you don't. You choose to stay or you leave. You choose to fight for your family or you choose to walk away. She stood up, her hand on her belly, and looked down at the man who had once been her whole world. You chose to leave when you thought I couldn't give you what you wanted. You chose your own comfort over our marriage. And now you want to choose to come back because your other choice didn't work out. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah held up her hand. But here's the thing, Marcus, I get to choose too. And I choose to protect my child from someone who sees love as conditional. I choose to surround them with people who will choose them every single day, not just when it's convenient. As Marcus left that night, Sarah made one final decision that would ensure her child's future in a way that would shock everyone who knew the story. What she did next would not only secure her baby's inheritance but would also teach Marcus a lesson about the true cost of his choices. 3 months later, Dr. Sarah Chen gave birth to a healthy baby girl she named Hope Catherine Chen, hope for the future she was building, Catherine in honor of Marcus's mother, who had become like a second mother to Sarah. The birth was attended by Sarah's parents, Catherine Wellington, and Dr. Rodriguez, who had become not just Sarah's doctor but one of her closest friends. Notably absent was Marcus, who had sent flowers and a card but had respected Sarah's wishes to stay away. As Sarah held her daughter for the first time, she felt a completeness she had never experienced before. This tiny person, with her perfect fingers and toes, her shock of dark hair and her father's eyes, was everything Sarah had dreamed of and more. But what no one in that room knew was that Sarah had one final surprise that would change everything. A week after Hope's birth, Sarah's lawyer arrived at the hospital with documents that would secure her daughter's future in ways no one could have imagined. Sarah had established a trust fund for Hope, but not just any trust fund. Using her medical patents, her savings, and some very smart investments, Sarah had created a fund worth over $20 million, more than enough to ensure Hope would never want for anything. But the real shock came in the terms of the trust. If Marcus ever tried to claim parental rights or seek custody, the entire fund would be donated to charity, and Hope would inherit Sarah's medical practice and research instead. However, if Marcus chose to stay away and allow Sarah to raise Hope in peace, Hope would inherit everything on her 18th birthday, making her one of the wealthiest young women in the country. It was Sarah's final gift to her daughter, the assurance that she would never have to depend on anyone who didn't choose to love her unconditionally. But the story doesn't end there. Because 6 months after Hope's birth, something happened that no one saw coming. Marcus, who had been living his free life with his young girlfriend, made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He signed away all parental rights to Hope, not because Sarah asked him to, but because he finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell him. In a letter he sent to Sarah, he wrote, "I realize now that being a father isn't about biology or legal rights. It's about showing up every day, making sacrifices, and putting someone else's needs before your own. I've never been that person, and I don't know if I ever could be. Hope deserves better than someone who might choose to leave again when things get hard." The letter continued, "I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a second chance, because I already wasted the first one. I'm just asking that someday, when Hope is old enough to understand, you tell her that her father loved her enough to let her go." And that, my friends, is where our story ends, but also where it begins. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't about two people finding each other. Sometimes they're about one person finding the strength to choose themselves and their child over someone who couldn't choose them back. If this story moved you the way it moved me, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Nuel Stories for more incredible tales of love, loss, and the strength of the human spirit. Because every story we tell here proves that sometimes the ending we didn't plan turns out to be exactly the beginning we needed. 5 years later. Today, Dr. Sarah Chen is the Chief of Pediatric Cardiology at Mount Sinai Hospital, a position she's held for 3 years. She's revolutionized pediatric heart surgery and has saved hundreds of children's lives. Her research has led to breakthrough treatments that are used in hospitals around the world. Hope Catherine Chen is a bright, happy 5-year-old who loves books, ballet, and helping her mommy fix people's hearts. She's surrounded by love, from her mother. Her grandmother Catherine, who visits every week, her aunts and uncles from the hospital who've become her chosen family, and the countless patients' families who consider Sarah and Hope part of their extended family. Marcus remarried his young girlfriend, but the marriage lasted less than 2 years. He's currently on his 3rd relationship since leaving Sarah, still searching for something he's never quite able to find. He's never tried to contact Sarah or Hope again, keeping his word about staying away. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is what Sarah discovered about herself. The woman who once thought she needed a husband to be complete found that she was already whole. The woman who thought she needed someone else's love to validate her worth discovered that the most important love was the love she had for herself and her daughter. And Hope? Hope is growing up knowing that she was chosen every single day by a mother who moved heaven and earth to bring her into the world. She's growing up understanding that love isn't about what someone can give you, it's about what you're willing to give them. Sometimes the most shocking ending is the one where everyone gets exactly what they deserve. This has been another Mr. Nuel Stories production. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, remember, the best stories aren't always the ones with happy endings. They're the ones that remind us what we're capable of when we choose love over fear, strength over comfort, and hope over despair. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories that will change the way you see the world. And remember, your story matters too.